Hey guys, we're at the Imp and the Ogre. My name's Paul.
Yeah, this is Ryan.
Today we are not going to complain about something, I don't think. We're going to talk about Under Illefarn.
Yeah, this is a first edition AD&D adventure designed for 4 to 6, level 1 to 3 players. Originally published in 1987. It's by Steve Perrin. And this was a Forgotten Realms product at the time. If you want to pick up a copy for yourself, you can get a PDF on the DM's Guild website. So, brief synopsis. This adventure is an introductory adventure. Admittedly so, like designed to introduce players to the world of Forgotten Realms and the system behind it. And real briefly, the players are militia members. Things happen, and eventually they end up exploring a ruined Dwarven stronghold.
Which is, I think, the best way. Well, we've talked about this in lots of other things, but being part of something to start beginning adventures is by far the easiest and awards all of your players with motivation from the get-go. They don't need to meet each other. They already know each other, and they've got reasons to do stuff because you can just employ them to do the things that you want them to do.
Just have to do what they're told.
Exactly.
You got a job. So, general impressions. A couple things before we dive into the meat of the actual content here. One of the things, or one of the options, I guess, that they present in this adventure that I really liked is you can start the players off as level 0 characters. You know, not even a PC yet. You know, you start off as, or I guess not even a class character. You start off as kind of just, you know, Joe Potato, the farmer who's working the weekends as the militia. And from there you can gain enough experience to actually become a legitimate, you know, level 1 fighter or whatnot. And what I did think was super clever in the way they handled this is you just start with negative experience points. I can't remember the exact number is, but you have to earn so much experience before you reach level 1.
Yeah.
So you start with this level experience debt. And I thought that was really well done. As this is an introduction to the Forgotten Realms campaign setting, I liked that they provided a good context for the different player races. Right, so what like, you know, if you're human, this is how you fit into this area. If you're elfish, this is how you fit. I mean, if you're elfish, you're basically affiliated with this group type of thing.
Yeah.
If you're dwarven, then these are the likely affiliations. And I always appreciate any information that you can provide to players to help them fit better into the fabric of the game world in the adventure. Yeah. What else did I want to mention? There's just in the introductory materials, there's a lot of cool things that I liked. Oh, I in reading this, I really like the fact that prices for complex things are more expensive in the town that you're in. So you want to buy a crossbow, it's got a huge markup because there's nobody local that can make it. So there's like import fees on it. And I just like that from a design decision. Like almost all the stuff that you'd be buying that are marked up, like you probably wouldn't be affording right at the beginning anyway, so it's not a huge expense to
like
you.
Like prices are doubled basically for things that you wouldn't be able to find in a small town.
No, I just thought that was like, it totally makes sense.
Good world building.
It's world building, and I do like that it added constraints to the players. Right, like you're suddenly, well, no, you can't afford a crossbow. And a lot of the stuff, and I can't remember if I wrote it anywhere else, but you actually get given a lot of stuff. Because you're members of the militia. So you get militia equipment, and then as we'll talk about later, you get hired to go do something and you get some more equipment that way too. So it's kind of changes the normal expectations that you have, that you get enough money, you buy stuff. It's like, well, no, you can't afford this. You're stuck with what I give you because that's the way it is. And to me, that's a lot more believable, especially if you're a militia. Like a militia person that can afford to have a 75 gold piece, like awesome weapon to begin with, is like, really? That's like 10 years worth of income for your potato farm, buddy.
So yeah, they did a good job with like an arc, like a power arc in this. You know, like you really start out with nothing, and then as the story progresses, you go from being like, okay, like you're gonna help us with this. Like we need to kit you out to go be able to do this, and they provide you with a bunch of stuff. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, and another point I wanted to just make in general is I really miss in 5th edition that you don't have trainers anymore. You know, in older editions, if you wanted to level up, you had to have people to train with. So there was trainers that you'd be expected to pay money to level up with. And one of the things that they talk about in here is that, you know, you can have rewards that aren't monetary, but you get training. You know, like you help this guy out. So yeah, no, I'll teach you that magic spell. So instead of having to pay the usual 100 gold pieces to become a level 2 magic user, you don't have that cost anymore. And I kind of, in reading this, I'm like, I got kind of nostalgic for that, because it bugs me that you just sort of level up. It's like, hey, I stabbed that goblin. Guess you can cast level 2 magic now.
Boom.
You know, just magically learn this. You know, I spent 3 days in a dungeon, and now I know how to cast fireball. Like there's always sort of been that disconnect.
Yeah, I hear you.
And we've complained about this before, but I want to be upbeat, and I want to focus on the good things, and that's this adventure. So I just reading that, I'm like, oh, then you have to go. If you want to learn how to use bows, you got to be friends with this guy. That's
the archer.
fine. Yeah, that's cool.
Can't just be mean to everybody all the time. You can't learn how to use the weapon.
Okay, so as we said, you're in a militia.
Yep.
And I think we both really just like how clean this is. You know, you have motivation. You have a raison d'etre.
It resolves so many problems that starting adventurers have all the time.
Yeah. You don't have to like the other PCs. They're your co-workers.
You may, exactly. You're stuck with them
regardless.
Stuck with them,
yeah. You know, like,
it gives a reason for everyone to be together for any reason. Yeah.
Yeah, and the motivation to go do stuff.
Yep.
Right? You don't have to be you don't have to have the financial motivation that there's reward for it. It's just like, no, you're the militia, and you got to go do this because
it's your job.
It's your job, man.
Yeah, everyone's part of the militia.
Yeah, and it does a nice job pointing that out too. Like, whatever your background is, if you're in Daggerford, you get recruited into the militia. So even if you were like a wandering adventurer that's just hanging out in town, it's like, guess what, buddy? You've been recruited.
I also like that it gave like age ranges for the different races. It's like if you're an elf between the years of 200 and 500, you're part of the militia. Yeah. If you're a dwarf between 80 and 130, you're part of the militia. Yeah. If you're 15 to 25, you're part of the militia.
Yeah, there's that requirement of all, I guess able-bodied individual had to help out with the militia.
And even they gave like child rearing like rules. I'm pretty sure they're like, if you're a woman, you can't use the like I had a baby.
Yeah, no, it's actually really detailed, the militia rules. Okay, so you're in the militia, and I think a lot of the older adventurers do a really good job of presenting starting towns. And Daggerford here is same deal, right? It's a 300-person walled town with a ducal keep. And I didn't want to talk about everything in there. I think they did a really good job of presenting it. There was some things when I was reading through there, I'm like, that's awesome. I'm going to write that down to talk about. But like for example, there's a halfling tavern keeper whose name is Full Bar Hard Cheese, and I'm like, that's perfect.
Just a good name.
It's just a good name. I'm like, you gotta give shout outs when you're reading Full Bar Hard Cheese, and you're just like, that is the D&D-est name, and the fact that it's a halfling too, I'm just like, beautiful. Everything about that just made me smile. There's other weird things in town. There's 2 jewelers in town, which I'm like, okay. I wonder if this just has more to do with historically. I feel that people cared more about treasure weight, so the need to turn coins into gems used to be a bigger deal. Now we're just like, I have 100,000 gold pieces in my backpack. Sure.
Yeah. You're so strong.
Yeah. Look at those muscles,
That makes sense.
So I think that's why they're there. And they're interesting people. I think one's a gnome illusionist. So if you were a gnome illusionist, you could train with them and whatnot. Yeah. So the NPCs are really flavorful, if you will. One thing I did note that you'd probably have to change. Well, actually, I know you'd have to probably change if you were going to. I know you have to probably. you'd have to change going
And then
to
you'd have
5th
to
edition.
probably change it.
Probably, I know, maybe kind of have to do this. Is that there's a church of Lathlander, which is fine, but it says in the adventure that the priest there will raise one person a day. Like, so if you die, he's just like, okay.
Okay.
I liked the fact that there's a hierarchy to like who he'll raise.
Yeah.
So like the more, then he'll raise a noble before he'll raise like a regular person.
Yeah, like members of the church get priority or whatever
so
it is.
there's a hierarchy, and if someone else happened to die, the Duke happened to trip and fall on his sword or something, and be like, no, you're not getting raised today. You got to raise this guy instead. But I do think you'd have to tweak that because, and I might be wrong on this, but I seem to think to recall that in this edition, Raised Dead didn't have a material cost. There wasn't the $300 diamonds fee that you'd have to pay. So I'm guessing that you'd probably have to change that,
right?
Because he's not. He's just a chest full of tens of thousands.
Just
of
take it out.
of diamonds. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Like with something, because that's super expensive.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to raise a pig farmer because he doesn't have. It's like, oh yeah, I just throw 300 gold pieces. Right.
Just remove him from
it's the worst kind of classism. I mean,
Yeah.
resurrection in D&D helps maintain class hierarchies. So I thought that I just reading through, I'm just like, oh, you'd have to tweak that. There's a really nice rumor table. I don't know if you had any opinions on the rumor table at all. I think they were fine, but one thing I disappreciated is that the rumors were not true false. It was true, or it's up to you.
Yeah,
right?
they're rumors.
They were rumors, so there wasn't anything there's like absolutely no, this is wrong. They're just like, no, if you feel like there's like a dragon in the swamp, there is.
Yeah.
It was a minor little design decision when they put this together. I'm just like, I like that. It just made me feel warm inside. That
it's a good addition because, like, I remember reading through it and being like, very cool. Because oftentimes, like, I think people want to spend time in town, but you don't really have like much to tell them. It's like, we want to go to the jeweler, and you can just like. They're like, what's up? And you're like, oh, no, I heard that there was a thing back in the thing at this time. And then they're like getting useful interactions out of, and like none of it could be true for sure. But it's like you can create town interactions from it. I remember reading through and like laughing at some of them. And it was good.
Look, some of them are ridiculous and some of them are super true. But I just like the fact that it could be the most ridiculous rumor and you're just like, yep.
Yeah. Just pick the craziest one out of the lot. And they're like, there's no way that could be true. Let's go to the swamp. And you're like, you run into a swamp dragon.
Yeah. Steve, the swamp dragon. Like, oh, his name's Steve. It's like, yes, my name is Steve.
Yeah.
You just make it as weird as you want.
He lives outside the Duchy of Jeff.
Yeah, I like that. And speaking of which, like, I felt that they did a really good job of providing enough information on NPCs to make them usable. Right? Like, it explicitly says, like, you may not use any of these, but if you choose to, here's some information to make them workable. And I like that a lot, in that a lot of the backgrounds have potential hooks.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it definitely fleshed it out to the certain point where I could see myself, if I ran this would definitely be the hub for the beginning of a campaign.
Yeah.
Because there's enough information and people to interact with that you could get little nuggets of like, oh, is that the case? Maybe we'll look into that. Or, oh, you've heard this before. Let's go talk. Like, one random throwaway is one of the magic users, I can't remember which one. Oh wait, that's what it is. It's the court mage, and it says in there that he took over from the previous court mage, who he was an apprentice from, and when that guy retired, and he retired to a mage tower. Nobody's seen him in years, and they assume he's dead, but nobody's bothered to go knock on the door, right? And that's just like a little throwaway line. So you can have that in there. That's maybe he isn't dead, or maybe something went wrong. Like, there's a whole adventure in there to investigate the mage tower in a little throwaway line. And I really appreciate it when there's an adventure that gives me adventure fodder, where it's just all these little seeds where I could see me populating a map with other interesting things for my PCs to do. That once we're done the main body of it, and someone's just like, hey, can we go check out that mage tower? It's like, yes.
You sure can.
You sure can. And then there's already something. Like, it just builds up the area with interesting
you've got
places.
a place to go. You've already got like an NPC to talk to in town that is connected with it. Yeah, it's great.
So,
I mean, I'm always a fan of like good starting towns.
Yeah, and that's just the beginning of it. Like I didn't write down a bunch of them, but like you don't find out, but the Master of Arms in the dukedom is the illegitimate heir of the last duke. So he's like third in the line of succession, and it doesn't explicitly like. You can find it out kind of like the guy knows, and like one or two other people know, but the current duke, like his half brother, doesn't know, kind of thing. And I loved about it, like he doesn't really want to explicitly take over, but what it says in the adventure is that he, his half brother and his half siblings are inclined to go adventure, like they're the adventurous spirit, so he encourages them. And he wouldn't be super sad if they didn't come back, right? So he encourages them to pursue dangerous hobbies because if they die, he gets to take over. I'm just like, that's like awesome. Like it's subtly evil, but not really overtly evil.
Yeah.
So it's that type of like color that they put into this town that I'm like, this is there's lots of fun little nuggets in there that I can use. Maybe he gets a taste for it, or maybe he decides to pursue it. I also really like that it's fleshed out enough to indicate which NPCs would have apprentices or acolytes. So if you were going to be some sort of magic user, you'd know how you'd fit in, right? Because that's one of the things where you're in a militia. Well, how can you be a militia and
something else?
A spellcaster? It's like, well, yeah, you're just an apprentice under this guy,
right?
And I thought it was interesting too because that's what affects like your availability of spells and whatnot is who you're buddies with. Once again, because this ties back to sort of first edition training.
Such a good way to do things, like especially starting at level 0. It's like they've got they planned for all this to happen. Like you had to find people that would teach you these things. It's like if you're sitting there, it's like, well, I want to be a wizard. And it's like, well, who's going to teach you? And you're like, okay, well, I guess we have to go look. Let's find who are the magic users in town.
We all know that a letter gets delivered to you that tells you that you're a wizard, and then go to the train station, go to wizard school. I just think fitting into it. Let's just collect my thoughts here. I like that it's got built-in backgrounds. Like it doesn't force the players to like, oh, you have to do it this way, but it provides the necessary tools for you to build a really well integrated member of the community. Yeah. Right. That you can be a local and still be a paladin or a proto paladin, on the way to all that fun stuff that you're built into it. And there's enough downtime between sort of the expeditions that it totally makes sense that like if you needed to go to Waterdeep to say your vows, it totally makes sense. You just went, you guys have been doing nothing really for the last month. You went, you made your vows, you came back, you got your shiny cloak and your pen and all that type of stuff. Like it fits in there. It's not just like non-stop. All right, the whole adventure is we're just going militiaing. Right? Like, you have that. The adventure is designed to have realistic downtime.
Well, I think it says like once a month. You have to once every couple months you need to go on militia duty or something like that.
It's not every day.
Like you're on duty like a few times a month or whatever it is. I can't remember what it exactly says, but it's not like ridiculous. You're not just like full on militiaing every day. Like,
well, yeah, because it's a volunteer, quote unquote volunteer. It's a mandatory volunteer position. Actually, it'd be kind of funny when you're running this adventure is that you can just sort of have as a throwaway bit of information something really bad that happened to the militia
to the other
while you were
shift.
on downtown. You hit the night shift, all got eaten by vampires, and so you're short staffed now, so you got to go work double shifts. I just think it's a lovely.
Well, that's kind of how they lead up to like the big part of the adventure is that like you just got off shift, but the guy you all really like is asking for a favor.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was really neat. And I don't know if you have anything else you want to say about the town. But the last thing I wanted to mention before we get started on the quests, if you will, was they provided really nice random encounter tables. Right? So it's not just list of monsters. It's, there's monsters, but behavior, which is always appreciated. And the part that really sort of tickled my fancy was that there's a nighttime table and a daytime table, and there's the same, not completely, but there's a lot of the same encounters on both.
Different behaviors.
But they have different outcomes. So like if you come across, if you roll, say, the orc raiding party during the day, they just try to lay low because they don't want to fight in the sun, and they're like, we're sleeping, let's leave us alone. So they will try to just hide and let you go by, so you can completely miss them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But if it's a night, they're going to ambush you.
Yeah.
Right. And there was a bunch of other ones like that too, which I just thought, yeah, that's great. And if you've already had it in this, one night or day, and you roll it again, well, it's already happened. So I just thought that was well done.
Smart. They did a good job.
Okay. Anyways, that's enough.
Job 1. There was a lizard raid on Crom's holding. You're hired.
You're hired. Well, yeah, so I don't know if it's refugees or somebody shows up, but basically there was a raid on an outlying barony. So the militia, the Baron was away during the raid, and so you go check it out. You see there's dead bodies. It was burnt to the ground effectively. And when you show up, you find out that the Baron, who had been away during the raid, rode into the marsh after the raiders. And you find this out from his wife.
Someone's there. Yeah.
So you go after the Baron, who's gone after the lizard
raiders.
Folk. Yeah. And what happens?
You run into more lizard people. There is a small note, which I thought I also appreciated this too. So the lizard people that raided the holding were the blue feather lizard people. But you run into lizard people, so there's an opportunity there that the PCs could potentially attack them thinking it's the raiders if they didn't really pay attention to the details, which I liked about that. But if you spend the time to talk to the lizard people that you run up against, they'll be like, no.
Yeah, it's
we're not
Red Eye.
They're like, we're not the blue feathers. We didn't do this.
Yeah.
We don't want them to do that. So we're on your side, basically.
Yeah, there's multiple tribes of lizard folk, and was it the Red Eye is a shaman who actually wants to interact with. So once again, cool NPC that can have a lot or little to do with the interactions with the town.
Could go either way,
right? The PCs could fight them immediately, and that destroys all potential stuff. But if you talk to them, you get more information, you get some help, you get some guides, and it can lead to a future quest giver. It's not in the adventure. There's no other further interactions other than some motivations for this guy. But once again, this is another situation where, for the follow-up adventure, you have a contact in the swamp, and maybe you do find out about Steve the Swamp Dragon.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. They worship him.
So I did also like that, and I also really like that when you find the Baron's party, they all got eaten. Yeah.
By dinosaurs.
Yeah, they didn't even get killed by the lizard folk. They got eaten by
dinosaurs.
Yeah. So,
don't go into the marsh.
So it was pretty funny. And then from there, it becomes a recovery mission, I guess you would think about it, because you're trying to get the Baron's ring of rulership or whatever it is. It's the status symbol.
Yeah.
So when you find the dead Baron and his retainers,
his ring's not there.
They've been looted.
Yeah.
And then what you basically do is you backtrack the original raiders to their camp, and then you fight the lizard folk, and then
find the ring,
the goods, and you return the ring, and that's basically the nature of the little excursion here, if you will. I think it was pretty well balanced. I like that if you befriend, quote unquote, the non-hostile lizard folk, they will help guide you.
Yeah.
So you can avoid.
I like the how they described it. When you're walking out, they'll swim up next to you and pop out and be like, "This way," or like, "Don't go that way."
Yeah. So you don't really see them, but they poke out and just be like, "No, that way, over that way. No, not this way. You got to go that way." So I just like that it allowed you to avoid random encounters, basically, because you're being guided away from danger. That being said, as enjoyable it is to have a Baron get eaten by a dinosaur, I must admit that I'm always a little hesitant to have dinosaurs in my D&D campaigns for basically one reason, and it's druids. Okay, right, because shape-shifting ruins everything. I'm just going to flat out say that, because the general rule is that if to shape-shift into something, you have to have
been in contact with it,
right? So if you have dinosaurs early on, that means your druid who now in 5th edition get shape-shifting ability at level 2, can turn into those animals. And dinosaurs, for whatever reason, have historically, and I haven't gone back and checked 5th edition like statting, tend to be kind of overpowered for whatever reason. Usually have multiple attacks and what have you. So
you just put a level restriction on it.
Yeah, I don't know. It just that would be my only concern. Is if I had a druid in the party.
I'm a velociraptor now.
Well, because there's dinosaurs. You know, like you can do it. I'm a pterodactyl. I mean, yes, I get that if level 2 can't fly. Turn it, can't fly. But you know what I mean? Like having experienced it, you have access to these really strong monsters. And, you know, and yeah, I understand that like druid's power level sort of tapers off. But a level 2 druid turning into a dinosaur is just going to shred everything, and that would be sort of my concern. Not so much that like he's shredding everything, but he's just going to be so much more effective than all the other party members. You know, it's less fun when you're like, I don't have anything to do.
Yeah.
He's like,
I mean, I guess it depends what they're turning into, but like is a bear stronger than like what kind of small dinosaur do you think you could turn into?
I don't know. I'd have to look into the rules or whatnot. Bears are, I mean, shapeshifting in general at early levels is kind of broken, and having more powerful things to turn into seems to make it more broken.
Yeah.
You know, so on top of having twice as many hit points as anybody else, you know, do twice as much damage, you know, or 3 times as much damage. I don't know. That would be my only concern with dinosaurs early on. Like I have nothing especially against the idea of, you know, that Land of the Lost feel of you know, having that in your D&D. It's just druids ruin everything. That's my motto, I guess. For
they are strong.
They can. So yeah,
that's mission 1.
That's it.
I also like, I mean, about these like militia things that there's no like putting about, you know. It's just kind of like you're there to do your job, and your job's done, you come back. There's no like wasting time to do it. Yeah. Job 2 is just as simple.
Caravan duty.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a patrol, an escort mission. I think as written, the only encounters you would have are random encounters, which you roll for. And I have nothing against the structure of this assignment. I just sort of don't like that you could do it and not have any encounters.
That was like my note. I was like, I guess you could have random encounters, and then it just kind of gets the point across that you're like part of the militia. It's like boring duty that nobody wants to do, but you still have to go grab Joe and his kids and like bring them back down. Yeah.
No, I think I would actually, I would add a fixed encounter, even just something like a bandit ambush or something like that, because there's NPCs to protect, and it doesn't have to be super hard.
Throw in the orc ambush on this one.
Yeah, you could just be the orc ambush and just do it that way. Alternatively, you could actually have, you know, somebody trying to steal something specifically from this, so you could build it up more in that regards. Yeah. But I'd probably want at least 2. You know, I'd probably want to have 1 on the way there that could just be something random to just, you know, show that it is dangerous.
Yeah.
Even something boring like wolves or whatnot.
Yeah.
And then maybe have something a little bit more serious on the way back, because if they expend all the resources and whatnot, who cares? They're going to be
on the way
afterwards. I like a little bit more structure to it. But then again, like you said, it's like you spend 3 days, roll. Nothing happens. You pick up the caravan. You go back. It takes 3 days, roll. Nothing happens.
Militia
duty. You've been militia. Yeah. So that just, it's fine, but I think it would benefit from staging some specific things.
See, it would be better if the militia. Okay. It would be better if the caravan duty was to go pick up the people. One of the people was the Duke's daughter. Then they get ambushed on the way back. That's when she gets kidnapped.
Yeah, but I mean that truncates the adventure a little bit. And I kind of like, we'll get to it in a second, but I kind of like how she gets kidnapped. I mean, and the point is too, is like, it's not all caravan duty. You're doing a militia patrol. So what you do is you're on patrol to, I can't remember the town is. And then when you're in that town, a caravan's like, oh, we lost our guards. Can we go back with you? Right. So it's not like you're hired to do caravan duty. It effectively becomes caravan duty though. So I don't know. I like the idea of maybe there being even if you didn't have an encounter on the way there, like you could just do random encounters that way. But I do kind of like the idea of there being maybe some ulterior motive for the guy to want, to need the guards. Maybe he refused to pay his caravan guards, and they so they all said, well, up yours, and then they leave, and then they're the ones that ambush them, and then it becomes sort of then there's room for negotiation.
Well, he didn't pay us. And you're
Exactly.
like, well, I guess that's his fault.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
So it would. There's sort of that interesting conundrum in that you can't kill him.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
So you could even not have a combat encounter. It could be a potential combat encounter, but you could just convince the guy to pay the people what they're owed, and so on and so forth. So I think you could just have a little bit of a fun encounter in there somewhere, just to beef it up a little bit. I felt that one was just felt a little tossed in.
Plain, yeah.
And then last, as you sort of implied here, is the rescue mission.
Yeah, the Duke's daughter gets
Sister.
Sister?
Yeah, her brother's the Duke.
Okay. Kidnapped by the neighboring Duke. Who is it? Yeah. What is he?
Some baron or something.
Baron,
Some other nobility.
Puts her to sleep. What does he use?
He's on an official visit. He's so taken by her charms that he drugs her. I want to say
sleeping
I think he
potion or
roofies
something.
her,
Yeah.
and then him and his retainers kidnap her in the night and then flee.
The best part about this whole thing is I loved when it was describing how he wants to get her back, and it's the Duke wants to know why he took her, and he will persistently ask until told. It's not like he even wants to get her back. He's just I need to find out why. It's we just have to find out why. I'm just going to persistently do it.
Yeah, that's funny. So this is an interesting thing in that the Duke, the way the town is structured, the Duke doesn't have any authority over the militia because you work for the city council effectively. So you get hired, off duty.
Yeah, you get woken up on your off duty, and he offers you guys gold to go help.
Yeah, so he offers you a reward, and what is actually great for the PCs here is that he offers to gear them up.
Yeah, horse and gear.
So you get a horse, and which you get to keep, and X number of dollars, or not X number of dollars. It's certain equipment he can provide for you. So it doesn't really benefit you as much if you're a magic user. But I think you can get chainmail and a few other things, which are super expensive, as we've illustrated. There's no way you would have been able to afford any of this previously. So you get kitted out pretty good. So the point I made on here is as presented, there's no necessary order that you need to run these little mini adventures in.
Yeah.
But regardless of how you did it, I would recommend that you run the rescue mission last.
Yeah.
Just because of this fact, you get kitted out. So if you do this one first,
everything's so much easier.
So much easier because you have better gear
and horses.
So I would say that if you did this at level 1, it'd be a little tough.
Sure.
So I would highly suggest that you do the other 2 first.
Yeah.
And then run this one last. Actually, I think I wrote down if I was going to run this, I would do the Caravan first because it's boring. And
or start with the Caravan.
Yeah, start with the Caravan, exactly. So
start the whole thing with the Caravan.
Well, I mean, you're militia.
Yeah.
That'd be my first encounter would be Caravan. I mean, you could theoretically have you as Caravan guards to begin things, and then you get fired when you get to town, and that's how you end up in the militia. But I think that's the order I would do because it builds the intensity.
Right.
It gets more interesting as you go along instead of going from the raid, which I think is a pretty interesting little mini adventure, and then the Caravan patrol. You're just snooze.
Yeah. True.
And then the rescue mission is
the part of
it's complex. It's got some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So you basically get kitted out, and then you follow the back trail, and there's an ambush laid for you. So basically, the guy's got a bunch of men at arms. They've laid an ambush. A couple of them pop out and say, "Hey, guess what? The Baron doesn't want to talk to you." So
Yeah.
Go away. And you're like, aha, we can take these 2 guys. And you attack, and they're like, aha, there's actually 8 of us, or whatever it is. So
just like an old movie, like, ha we've got 3.
Well, we have 7. So yeah, just reading it, I'm like, these guys are kind of tough, right? They're all high AC, high hit point, fightery types.
Yeah.
So you could easily, I could see it being pretty swingy. Like I could see it really going either way.
Sure, yeah.
And realistically, you can't kind of have this fight and then be like, oh, we're super hurt, we're going to rest for the night. It's like, no, I mean, I think
gotta go
this,
on.
Yeah, as the DM, I think it's your job to really push the need for haste, right? Like, if this guy gets back to his keep, we're never going to get, once he's behind fortifications, this is a
3-day ride he left last night.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing I guess we should mention, because it doesn't make sense necessarily, is that you're actually part of the rescue mission. You're not the only rescue mission. Yeah. So basically, you're following the back trail with the Duke, with the Duke's men-at-arms.
Well, there's 3 different paths that he could have taken to get back to his keep. Yeah. And so he distributes the people that he hires in either way. And you take, of course, the most dangerous route.
No, we take the least likely, actually. Like
yeah.
The PCs get sent on what the Duke believes to be the least likely way to go because it's the most dangerous.
Yeah.
So that's why the party gets sent to go there, and it turns out that the most dangerous is the way that they actually went, right? So there's a tough ambush you're supposed to follow, and then you're in a region, I think they call it the Laughing Hollow. So you're basically in the Elfwood, if you will, where the wild elves are. Yeah. And I really liked all the random encounters in here. They were flavorful. They fit thematically, even though they were a bit sort of a monster fiesta, but at least thematically, they would make sense to encounter in this area. Okay. There's the bears with the bees, right? The bears trying to get the honey, and there's the bee swarms, and then you can get attacked by the swarms of bees.
Yeah.
Ghouls are always fun. I mean, they don't really fit overall to have undead in here, but I guess if you want to make it sort of spooky and dangerous, it's fine. And there's, the centaurs were another one in there that I kind of liked, because if there's an elf in your party, they're like, hey, all right, yeah, check you out later.
How's it going?
Because they're like guarding the area or something like that. But if there's no elves, you got to sweet talk them to stop them from fighting you. And then you can encounter like wild elves that just sort of like follow you, watching you.
Stare at you. Yeah.
So I thought it was pretty good. And then you're going through the place. Eventually, you find
the Baron.
Well, how's it work out? Oh yeah, it's
you run into him.
You run into her first, because you find out she's
a magic user.
She's a magic user. So as soon as she woke up, she cast invisibility on herself and just booked it.
Yeah.
So you find her, and then she sort of fills you in on a bunch of stuff, and then you're like, okay, well, we got to get out of here. And all of a sudden, a voice behind you says, "You're not going anywhere." And then there's the Baron with some other people,
and he gets shot in the back.
Oh,
well, he wants to fight you first.
Yeah, you can't ruin that payoff, right? He's willing to duel you.
Oh yeah.
For
one
the girl,
one
on one, or like 3-on-3,
or 2-on-3, or something like that. Yeah, it sets terms.
So there's this big negotiation. That's the best part. There's this big negotiation on like the terms of the duel and who's gonna fight whom and all that type of stuff. So you set it all up, and then he salutes you, and then he gets shot in the back with an arrow from a goblin, and then you don't have the duel at all. It goes right into like a goblin ambush.
And then the best part is that like he gets shot, but then he like tries to convince you to help him chase the goblins. He's like, it's like, these guys are more bad than we are. We should go get them.
Which like, sure.
It's just so weird. It's like a weird calamity of things where it's just like he's gonna fight you, and then he wants you to fight the goblins.
So and then there's a goblin ambush where you fight off, and then I think there's like a bunch of possible actions. I can't remember. Like maybe his men-at-arms get shot as well, and statistically speaking, they probably die from the ambush, which is why he tries to recruit you to help and blah 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 blah. But regardless, the idea is that you follow the goblin ambushers, and then you appreciated this part.
This is like, so you follow the goblin ambushers, you defeat them, and you find an elf in there who cannot walk anymore, and he, says thank you for your help and blah 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 blah. But he's a 7th level fighter and a 10th level druid and the king of the wild, like the king of the elves in the region. It's just like, oh, come on, guys.
You backtrack the goblins to where they've pinned down an elf hiding behind some rocks, and they're pew-pewing him with arrows. and you rescue him, and he's like so much more powerful.
He's like, just turn into a mouse and poof.
Yeah, so it kind of stretches the believability there. I mean, the idea is that you're supposed to rescue him, and he rewards you with little pendants that are, indicate that you're the friends of the forest or something like that. And so you get safe passage in the area, which is useful later on. But I agree with you that it just seems so unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the easiest solution is you just make the elf pin down a wild elf.
Yeah.
Who's related. You save the king of the forest.
Make him
cousin or something like that.
Make him the other one that comes back. An elf comes to town later.
Sure,
so you make him that one. The one thing that I do like, I mean, as silly as that is, I mentioned this before, I think when we were talking earlier, but like I appreciate like it's like a reputation grind in this adventure that like you were saying this could be a hub for like tons of quests later on. So like your interactions with all these different weird races along the way could influence if you're able to do things for the elves or them, right? If you break ties with the dwarves later on, then you don't get to do that stuff later. So I like that about all this.
So I kind of like the idea, though, especially if you make the elf like a common or something like, or weaker, that then there's a legitimate danger of them dying before you can take care of the ambush. Yeah. Or, the goblins. Because then it puts a little bit of pressure on there, because if he dies, then you don't get named Friends of the King, and then it doesn't like end any path, but it makes it more difficult. But if you say prioritize helping the elf, maybe you use potion on them or cast your curing spells to help them out, and you rescue them, then you get to become the king of the forest. You get to become the friends of the king of the forest, and there's the reward built into it. So like you're not overly punished for this person dying, but as is, if it's the actual king of the forest pinned down, he's got like a bajillion hit points because he's a super duper level. And, oh no, I'm low on hit points, I'm just going to cast like magic, cure serious wounds on myself because I can, right? So I think it adds a little bit of the believability, a little more believability. That
make him the prince or something.
Make it the
son
prince,
of the
or
king,
a grandson or nephew, or
important enough to the king of the forest that he would grant you his favor.
His favorite forester. Like it doesn't actually have to be.
You saved Steve. He likes to hang out in the swamp a lot. He's actually an illusionist.
He's a polymorphed, swamp dragon. So I think that's a little tweak that I would probably do just to add a little bit more believability in there. Yeah. It could even be an elf child that's wandered away, and you're saving a little kid, right? So like that's
true.
Totally possible.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Regardless, the whole idea here is that you rescue the Duke's sister, you become friends of the king of the forest, and then you go back to your 9-to-5 jobs. Okay, so you're kind of fancy now. You've got
some stuff.
You got some friends in high places now, so you can feel good about that while you're working on your dirt farm or whatever you're doing. And then we move to the big part.
Second part.
Second part. When you think about it.
Which is great because it happens again while you're on militia duty. An earthquake hits. One of the walls completely collapses in the city, and your wall is weakened. And then, presumably you go and check out what happened at the wall, and there's some like strength roll checks that you can do to help people that are collapsed underneath there.
It's the dwarves. There's 2 dwarves the wall falls on. It's the dwarves. It's not just random people. This is important. It's a couple of the dwarves from the dwarven smithy. The wall fell on top of them. And what's cool about this is basically a skill challenge, strength, mostly. But when you fail your strength checks, it does damage to the dwarves. So if you fail too many strength checks, they die. Yeah. So there's real stakes in this strength test. So you can rescue them if you're good or strong. Or you can kill them because you're messing about when you're obviously shouldn't be. I'm helping. No, you just killed the dwarves. And there's no, I won't say there's no there's no severe penalty to failing this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but there's definitely a boon to saving the dwarves. Sorry, I just had to think about how I wanted to phrase that. Now, you don't really find too much about that because the earthquake, if you rescue the dwarves, like a day or two later, one of the dwarves gives you amulets. And all it has is a dwarf rune on it. All it is just like, you don't know what it is, but it's like a symbol on a stone, and he's just like gives it to the party. He's just like, thanks. Because he's a dwarf. He doesn't explain what it is. But as we'll see, it kind of it marks them as friends of the clan, basically. So you got an amulet where you're like, I'm an elf friend, and you got another amulet that's like, I'm a dwarf friend. You know, so you get jewelry.
You're on your rep grind, man.
Exactly, exactly. You got to get the faction amulet.
Yeah, exactly.
To boost your stats.
You get it at friendly. You get like the cloak at honored.
Exactly. You know, you need to grind out your reputation before you can hit that first tier rating. So. What ends up happening, and I did actually kind of like this because it's a slow burn. It's not like, oh, there's an earthquake and the demon pops out of the ground and everybody's burning. It's a very slow burn. So a couple days later, a week later, or something like that is.
Can't remember. The river turns green.
The river turns green, and crops start to wilt, and animals start to die.
Well, one of the cool things about going back to the town that like I did like now that we're at this water part, it just like struck a bell. But like the town is run on guilds.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and there's a water guild that like their job was to go and collect water and like supply. And that's like actually part of the thing when they're doing it about the river turning green is that like, only drink from our wells that we've supplied with the clean water. And like, it's an actual problem. Yeah.
The cisterns that they maintain or what have you. Yeah. I remember that now. So basically the river's been poisoned upstream of the town. So it's not good. So I can't remember if you actually get tasked with figuring it out or if the elf shows up first.
The elves were going to get flooded. I remember we talked about this before, but they were worried that elves petition your help as well. That's why they're at the mouth of the cave, because the water's flooding down into the Laughing Hollow.
That's what it is. The water's been diverted. So like the clean water's been diverted, and the poison is flooding
the hollow.
There's the poison elsewhere or whatever. Yeah. So the river's been poisoned. There's water coming out of the mountain or the cave or something like that. So you get recruited by the king of the forest to look into this. Now, a little note that I put here is like, you don't get recruited unless you're friends with the king of the forest. So the one thing I kind of wish they'd put in here is some sort of alternative if you had failed in your little task. So... do they not come and help you, or do you just sort of like, you know, does it just slow things down because you have to investigate it on your own, and then you'll encounter elves in the woods?
Well, I think not having favor meant that you couldn't use their camp at the mouth of the cave. Yeah. Which was like, the way I read the adventure was that you're expected to kind of like go in, come out, chill with the elves.
Yeah, at least until you find,
come out, like keep going in and out.
Safe spot inside. Yeah. So yeah, if you are friends, then that is the bonus. I guess otherwise they just ask you for help, which once again, like this is one of those situations where I'm like, oh yes, the quasi-immortal elves can't.
They need the help of the 25-year-old militia man.
It's like, I don't want to go underground.
Yeah, they have that lame excuse that they're like, they're too claustrophobic to go underground, and the lack of light would be debilitating to them.
Well, because elves are photosynthetic, right? Like
and if they had the courage of their ancestors, they would go in and do it themselves.
Yeah, it's a bit much. Right?
It even says like, if one of your characters dies, you can re-roll as an elf and say that you're young enough and brash enough to throw away the old ways. It's like, I remember reading that and laughing. I'm just like, okay, this is ridiculous.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, so anyways, what we find out is that there's an ancient dwarven stronghold, the Illefarn or whatever, underneath these hills, and in interacting with the elves, you find the entrance that's become exposed from the earthquake. So you want to go in there and figure out what's going on, which is the short of it. So it's all kind of interesting. It's basically kind of like a mega dungeon.
It's a big dungeon.
It's a big dungeon. And we were talking about this a bit before we started recording, but I think the intention is that you're not expected to actually deal with all the threats in here. I think it's
shock troop tactics, guerrilla warfare.
Yeah,
find what you're there to do and get out.
Very much so. I think at the levels, even if you're at level 3 or whatever, which I don't think you should be. I think you're probably at level 2 party, and then be level 3 after you succeed in this. Would be probably how I would do the progression. But the dangers in there are above and beyond what your party could handle in terms of just like the threat level of the bosses and just the amount of enemies that are in certain regions of this. So it's very much, you got to be sneaky, you got to scout to a certain extent, and there are some features in here that are kind of working in your favor, because what we'll find out is, if you've been interacting with the NPCs in town, you can find out that the dwarves, the dwarven smithy, a bunch of them had left in recent years, and what you find out is that these dwarves were sort of like the remaining guardians of this dwarven stronghold, and that they left, basically the clan had gotten so small, so a couple centuries ago they made the decision to relocate to Daggerford so they can be in the neighborhood and still keep an eye on it. But the younger brother and some of the other members of the clan are like, no, we got to reclaim it, and they went. Yeah,
very Hobbit-y.
Let's go find Durin's throne and all that.
And they are looking for the crown.
Yes.
Dwarven crown.
It's a bit of Mines of Moria.
Yeah.
In the intervening years since the clan has moved out, other things have moved in, and at the time that the party gets there are now 3 factions in the dungeon.
Orcs, necromancers, I'm pretty sure.
Death cult necromancers.
And remaining dwarves that are still there. So you've got your friendly faction and the other.
Well, the friendly faction is only friendly to begin with if you have that dwarven, if you've ground your reputation and got the faction amulet.
True.
If you're wearing that marks you as friends of the clan, and they're much more immediately helpful. They're definitely neutral if you didn't rescue the dwarves. So you can use diplomacy to like gain their aid. But if you don't have that, they're not automatically like, come and chill with us. You can camp in our area and what have you.
That's what it almost gives you like 2 opportunities. If you mess up with the elves, you can be friends with the dwarves. But I mean, potentially you could just mess it all up and not like be friends with anybody and have to talk your way through it.
You lose out on. You don't. Not being friends with either of them doesn't ruin the adventure for you, but it just makes it harder because you have fewer safe places.
That's right. Yeah. There wasn't like anything like dungeon wise in this that like stood out for me. I mean, the loot was like crazy, but there was no like mechanics in here or encounters that were like particularly special.
There's a bit of a puzzle to actually solve the problem, right? So basically what you end up finding out is that the earthquake caused damage to like the mine's water system, and some things got diverted. So poison water from something is being diverted.
Maybe the necromancers are doing it.
Diverted. And like this big water fountain's cracked, and it's what's flooding the elves out. So there's this water control mechanism which has some levers and whatnot. The puzzle isn't super difficult, but you pull the right levers and you stop the poisoning, you stop the flooding, you save the day, and you're done. And to do this, you don't really have to interact with any of the baddies. I'm pretty sure, I don't have the map in front of me, but I'm reasonably sure this is close to, if not in, the Dwarven controlled area.
And like we said, like we don't really think you're supposed to mess too much with the factions in there.
I think you're supposed to like make contact with them. Like you should figure out they're there, and you can definitely survive contact with those enemies. But if you try to push too far into the controlled areas, then you're going to run into trouble. One encounter I did like is to get to the control mechanism, you got to like climb up this pillar or whatnot, and the pillar is guarded by gargoyles, which, considering that you're going to be climbing up a wall, now you're suddenly being attacked by flying creatures. I was like, that's a pretty intense encounter. So
for sure.
And once again, I mentioned this in previous conversations, but it's always fun to have encounters where there's that environmental factor.
Where you could fall off the ladder.
You could fall off. It's not a ladder. Like, I don't think there's a ladder. I think you're climbing the face, right? So you got to, climb checks and maintaining climbs when you take damage and all that type of stuff. I think that makes it kind of interesting, especially depending on your party makeup. Like if you don't have lots of ranged attacks or anything like that, you're going to be at a severe disadvantage. So you might have to think of clever ways of getting in there. Gargoyles. Yes. But
there's like along the way in here, you can find like Dwarven trinkets worth like obscene amounts of gold because they're like ancestral relics to the dwarves. The crown that they're looking for is like a helm of brilliance with like a ton of other properties on it.
There's some obscene magic items and just relics, and the players can literally get hundreds of thousands of gold pieces in rewards from the Dwarven clan for returning these things.
Yeah, and it says like they will pay you for this.
Yeah,
they will give you what you want. It's so yeah, you're going to be very rich by the end of it.
Potentially, if you find the stuff.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to stumble across it. Some of them are super hidden, and some of them are in areas that aren't super safe. So I don't know. If you're running this, the idea that your level 3 players are going to find the super treasure right away is probably pretty low. If they manage to do it, I don't know. That's kind of like the end of the adventure, like of the campaign, really.
Yeah.
It's like you now each have 100,000 gold pieces. You buy the duchy, and now you're the Duke of Jeff. You know, like
it is a cool place though because, like it's something to come back to.
Yeah.
Like there's something that's looming that was unsuccessful, and that's gonna like eat away at your adventures for a while.
I do think the amount of money that you can get for things is too much. You know, like I think there might be sort of like the implied idea that, you know, good players are just going to be like, oh, that's a relic of your clan. Here you go.
Yeah.
Versus like, no, pay us. And they're like, okay, here's $1 bajillion.
Like they'll just pay you face value for it.
Yeah. And so I guess you could kind of force your bumpkin, you know, players to try to make appraise
It wouldn't be,
checks or
it
something.
wouldn't be unfair. Well, they're like cultural heirlooms. There would be no way that you could really you could be like, this is priceless.
Yeah.
Like that's what like really what you would appraise it at.
Yeah.
It's worth whatever they're willing to pay you for it.
Yeah, but I mean, some of them are like obviously valuable, like made of platinum, gem encrusted.
The crown is obviously.
Well, I mean, there's also like I can't remember. There's like effigies of like Moradin and stuff like that you find, and if they were like made out of clay and they have sort of like cultural significance, then like whatever. But they're if like you melted them down platinum, and sold them for scrap, they'd be worth a ton of money too. So that would be my only issue, I think, with this is the potential for your players to just stumble on like just an ungodly amount of wealth. Which, I mean, if that's the way you want to take your campaign, good on you. You know, like you now just all bought nobilities, and we're going to take this to Waterdeep, and it's going to be in, you know,
you bought Waterdeep.
You know, you're going to be like the nouveau riche, you know, country bumpkins in the big city, and we're going to go from there, and it's all court intrigue and what have you. But
the rich kids of Instagram of Waterdeep.
Which carriage should I take today?
Yeah, exactly.
So I
so many horses.
So that was the one thing I kind of like didn't really care for. So something could be said about maybe toning that down a little bit. Yeah, like a lot.
For sure. Yeah, there's no reason. I mean, whatever. It's just decide.
The other thing too is like if you were a pseudo evil party, there's not that many dwarves, right? Like compared to everyone else, there's like a dozen dwarves.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Right. So like they would not pose any legitimate threat if you just wanted to take them out.
And if you like, well, I guess you probably wouldn't know what it was, but if you knew what the crown was, you just like kill them all. Like
5th edition, man. You spend like an hour with it. You know exactly what it is, right? So you know that it's actually one of the most powerful items in the game.
True.
So, because you used it as a pillow and you slept on it one night. But yeah, so that whenever there's sort of like inappropriately power spiky things, like and hugely power spiky things, like I'm not opposed to players getting cool magic items that aren't necessarily level appropriate, but this is just such a huge amount of wealth that it changes the nature of the game.
Yeah,
you know,
you're right.
So anyway, that would only be my concern, but I did like that, you know, you'd be expected to maybe go back later to deal with the necromancers and all that type of stuff. And it's really there's really a lot of follow-up adventuring that you can do. Like it's a very fertile adventure area to progress in, which is why I found it weird that there's so much treasure that you could find
like immediately,
because like I just got $100 grand. I'm not gonna go fight some orcs, in D&D money,
I'm
right?
good.
Like when the average income per day is in the copper pieces type of thing. So I just thought that was a bit weird to me. Overall, though, like I did really like this adventure.
Oh yeah, I'd run it. Yeah,
the militia framing thing. Even if you didn't run the Under Illefarn parts,
I just did the militia as a starting bit.
You just did the militia thing that easily gets you up to like level 2, and then do whatever you want after that. Like just as a starting off your adventure. Boom, 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 boom. Like, because it's so clean. Yeah. And there's nothing.
And you have means. Like the players have means at the end of it too. They've got like transport. They've got equipment. They've like.
You got gear. Yeah. You got spells. You got horses.
Let's go, boys.
You're in the militia, but you don't actually. You have tons of free time. You're not beholden to them. You're not sworn to the service of the Duke or anything like that. You can just get up and go, and do whatever you want from there on out. And I really liked that. So
I agree.
I'd highly recommend this for new parties, especially for new players. When you don't necessarily have an idea of what type of player you want to make, you can easily just be like, "You're Steve, the Marsh Dragon." No, but you're a Dwarven blacksmith's apprentice. Yeah, like
for sure.
It's all built in there to make your life a lot easier from the get-go. And I thought that was really well laid out. Yeah, I liked it. That's all I can say. It's nice to have something that I can't really complain too much about.
I know it's a lot harder to grumble when there's nothing to grumble about.
I mean, there's things that could be better, but there's not a lot of them, and it's to a certain extent. Like I think it's a bit odd. It's nice, but it's odd that you have this big mega dungeon that you're not high enough level to deal with most of it. So like,
I kind of like that though, like the looming threat. Like you go too deep. I dare you. Yeah, go too deep.
Yeah. No, when you put it that way, that actually kind of like it dares your players.
Right? There's doors that are open that you shouldn't go through. Yeah. But like the curiosity of players is always going to drive them to something. Get deep enough, you're probably not coming back out.
Yeah, when you think about it that way, that's kind of a kind of.
And then what do you roll?
Way to think about
then what is your party roll? You're 3 dwarves in the next. You're part of the 11 dwarves that are in there. Like, are you part of the elves next? Like, what? There would be an interesting re-roll if you did like a TPK in there, because for sure you're not supposed to go deep enough.
No. And it's kind of the funny thing is like there's so many connections between the levels that you could be like, oh, there's this pit trap. I'm gonna go check out what's the bottom of it, and you're just like suddenly
you're 8 floors deep.
Yeah.
Well, that would be like an interesting or like a cruel thing. Maybe is like maybe the elves or the dwarves like warn like just do the water thing. Like go in, come back, don't go any deeper. They know what the threats are beyond that like small area of roaming packs of orcs or whatever it is.
The dwarves would be able to let you know that there's the death cultists are there and the
exactly.
Orcs. So you'd be forewarned that there's these enemies.
There's something behind the veil.
Yeah.
Don't go in there. And they'll go.
Well, because the thing is, like, it doesn't. The first fight isn't like super. It's just random stuff. It's when you get to like the boss fights, if you will, are just unwinnable at that level, right? So you could. The thing is, like, you could fight your way into the boss, who's then like 5 levels higher than you, and just like boom, 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 boom.
See, I don't like the idea of mega dungeons that you're meant to go through. It's just too much. Like, it's just like encountering it. But yeah, maybe that idea would be good.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of good mega dungeons are you're supposed to go in, explore a section, and leave type of thing.
Well, it also, like, I think going and doing something and leaving, like, maybe if you've cleared out a bit of the spot, the next time you come back, there's, like, more dwarves. And they've, like, set up a bit of, like, a front. And they're, like, trying to that could be like the campaign is reclaiming this thing, but you need to do other stuff in the meantime.
You flush out some of them, or maybe you go on a quest to like find more dwarves to bring them back, and then to help them establish more of a firm. Yeah, I mean, there's the whole. I mean, you could just build an extended like reclaiming the area mini campaign for sure. But still, I don't think you need like Helm of Brilliance plus a bajillion or whatever,
Well,
which is also like a Helm of Command and blah 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 blah.
Well, if you decide to keep it, the dwarves like turn on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's like 12 of them. You just like stabby stabby stab.
Yeah, and
You're done.
if you don't fix the water problem, the elves turn on the town.
Yeah.
Like there's consequences for not completing the things.
Yeah.
Like the elves stop helping the town, they stop like defending the wilds from them or whatever it is in the end. It's like in the final conclusion paragraphs. It's like if you win, good. If you fail, there's like 3 paragraphs of like everything bad that can happen.
Yeah, which makes sense. But I don't know. A lot of the ending there is sort of predicated on your players wanting to do the right thing,
To be good.
which that depends on your players. I don't want to complain about
Yeah.
alignments and player habits or anything like that.
Well, I don't have much more to say.
No,
here.
I think overall it was just good. It's
good.
I think I enjoyed it. I
The structure is fantastic.
yeah, there's lots of things I would crib, and I think running it just as is totally works for me.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, and as always, if you disagree with us, let us know. If you have any suggestions of good adventures that are similar to this or better than this, and you want to share them with us, we're always happy to hear from you.
Bye.
Bye.